Humanity built two engines. One engine of structure built a world based on how to record, how to build, how to control. The other engine of intuition dreamt of a world based on why to connect, why to feel, why to be.
Two very different drives.
For 10,000 years, they ran apart, each incomplete. This is the story of the great shell of knowledge, the heart that was hidden within it, and the long road to their convergence.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In our previous sessions, we traced how that shell, the engine of structure, evolved.
Right, from the very first writing, separating thought from the thinker.
All the way up to something like the Library of Alexandria, the Great Archive. Huge, but passive. A localized collection just sitting there.
Exactly. It was potential energy, wasn't it? Stored knowledge, ink on papyrus or parchment, but stuck on a shelf.
Static.
The shell knew how the world worked. In theory, it was cataloging everything. But it couldn't really do anything with that knowledge on a grand scale.
Not yet.
So today, we're diving into that critical leap, maybe even a frightening leap, where the shell stops just collecting data and becomes this active physical force that starts literally reshaping the planet.
It's the moment the blueprint turns into a mechanical hand, you could say. And just as importantly, we need to look at the heart's reaction, because it wasn't thrilled.
No, definitely not. Horror seems more like it.
Horror, passion, revolt. We'll see how the abstract knowledge of the shell breaks free and starts writing its own logic onto the actual physical landscape. It's a massive transformation.
Okay, so let's start with the big hurdle, the thing that held the shell back for literally millennia.
Yeah.
Copying things. Replication.
Yeah. The bottleneck. Think about it. Before the mid-15th century, if you wanted to share knowledge, say, Euclid's Elements from Alexandria or a Bible from a medieval monastery.
Someone had to sit down and copy it by hand, word for word, diagram for diagram.
It was incredibly slow, painstakingly slow, and expensive. The sources mention a single Bible could take a monastery maybe 2 years to produce by hand. And the cost was enormous. It's like buying a small farm, basically. So knowledge could be stored in the shell's archive, sure.
But getting it out,
Yeah.
getting it distributed.
Almost impossible on any large scale. It kept knowledge centralized, locked up with the elites, the church, the very wealthy. And it stayed that way for, 3,000 years after writing first appeared?
Just incredible inertia. Until, bang, mid-15th century, everything changes.
Johannes Gutenberg. The printing press with movable type.
And we really need to see this as more than just, a better way to copy.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just an improvement. It was a fundamental upgrade for the shell. It was the exact moment the shell learned the trick of mass-scale replication.
It could finally clone itself.
Precisely. The first real information manufacturing system. You set the type, proof it once, and then you can just churn out hundreds, thousands of identical copies. Mechanically. Efficiently.
And the impact was immediate, wasn't it? This ability to replicate just blew the doors off the old system.
Totally. Radical decentralization. All that knowledge that was locked away in monasteries, royal libraries, universities, suddenly it's portable. It's reproducible. It's, cheaper, comparatively.
So the archive spills out, it scatters across Europe.
And people start reading. Literacy rates surged. You get this emerging, educated public outside of the usual circles, merchants, artisans, local gentry. They can suddenly afford books, pamphlets, news sheets. It fuels what historians call the communications revolution.
A hunger for information. Challenges to the old authorities.
Exactly. That democratization is huge for society. But for the shell's own journey towards becoming this active force, the hidden power of the press was actually standardization.
Right, because hand copying isn't just slow, it's messy.
It's error-prone. Every scribe makes mistakes, introduces variations, maybe misinterprets a drawing. A diagram copied in Italy might look slightly different from one copied in England.
And if you're trying to build complex knowledge, say, in science or engineering, that inconsistency is a killer.
A massive drag. But the printing press, it brought this incredible fidelity, uniformity. Once that plate was set, every single copy of a complex astronomical chart or a detailed anatomical illustration or a mathematical table.
Exactly the same.
Identical. And this might sound a bit dull, uniformity.
Yeah. Yeah, not the most exciting word.
But it was explosive.
Okay.
Especially for the sciences, which were just starting to bubble up. Think about the scientific revolution. It absolutely depends on this.
How so?
Well, take Vesalius and his incredibly detailed anatomical drawings in the 1540s. The press allowed those exact images to be distributed widely.
So a doctor in Prague could see the same drawing as a doctor in Paris.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Before the press, if that doctor in Prague got a hand-copied version, who knows what errors might have crept in. Trying to replicate a procedure based on a flawed diagram?
Dangerous.
Okay.
I see.
But after the press, if a scientist in, say, Leiden publishes an equation or a chemical formula, a scientist in Oxford can trust they are looking at the exact same information. The blueprint is reliable, standardized.
It creates a common ground, a shared, verifiable body of knowledge that everyone can build on simultaneously.
Yes. You're not constantly second-guessing if the copy you have is accurate. You can trust the last published finding and move forward. It enables that systematic, cumulative buildup of scientific data. The press was like the technological foundation needed for science to scale.
So the shell has now created this huge, reliable, distributed library of how. Physics, engineering, chemistry, math. It's all out there, standardized, accessible.
Accessible to thousands of minds, inventors, engineers, thinkers, and that knowledge is just simmering, waiting for the next step, waiting for the means to turn that data into actual physical force.
Which brings us right to that moment, the critical leap, where the shell goes from abstract knowledge from words and diagrams on a page to physical reality. The standardized how breaks free from the book and starts literally overwriting the world. This is the Industrial Revolution, isn't it?
At its core, yes. We often talk about the economics or the social changes, which were massive, obviously. But fundamentally, this was the shell taking its standardized scientific knowledge and translating it directly into physical power, raw, relentless, tireless mechanical power. And the absolute key technology here, the sort of prime mover, was the steam engine.
And we shouldn't just skate over the steam engine. It feels like the perfect example of the shell acting on its own discovered principles.
It really is. You know, early engines like Newcomen's were okay, but wildly inefficient, basically just brute force. But James Watt, when he perfected his design around 1775, he wasn't just tinkering.
He was applying the science.
He was applying the abstract scientific knowledge from the shell's archive. He worked closely with Joseph Black, a physicist who developed the concept of latent heat.
Okay.
And Watt realized, using Black's theories, that the big problem with the Newcomen engine was wasting huge amounts of energy constantly reheating the main cylinder after it was cooled down by the steam condensing inside it.
Right. Makes sense. Constant heating and cooling.
So, based on that understanding of latent heat physics, he designed the separate condenser. Keep the main cylinder hot, condense the steam somewhere else. It sounds like a technical detail, but this innovation, born directly from abstract physics, made the engine vastly more efficient. It was the laws of thermodynamics made metal, abstract science converted into usable economic physical work. The shell had optimized a natural process.
Turning heat into motion on an industrial scale.
Unprecedented scale. And this power, this tireless mechanical energy, was immediately put to work in the most labor-intensive areas. Look at textile.
The spinning jenny, the power loom.
Transformed it completely. What had been skilled human craft, done at human pace, became this relentless, high-speed, mechanized process. The rhythm wasn't human anymore. It was the rhythm of the machine, dictated by the logic of mass production.
Human hands serving the machine.
Essentially, yes. And the shell didn't just stay put in the factory. It went mobile.
The locomotive.
Richard Trevithick, early 1800s. The steam locomotive starts literally rewiring the physical world. The shell isn't just building things in the world anymore. It's changing geography. It's changing our perception of distance itself.
Collapsing space.
Collapsing the space of objects, yeah. Suddenly you can move heavy stuff. Coal, iron, manufactured goods, even people across vast distances, quickly, reliably, on a schedule. This built the logistical network, the whole circulatory system, needed for this new industrial economy. It was the shell's logic of efficiency and connection drawn in iron rails across the land.
Okay, so the locomotive collapses the space of matter. But then comes something else, the telegraph.
Ah, yes. Samuel Morse, 1836 or so. This is huge, maybe even more profound in some ways and often overlooked.
Yeah.
It's a critical step for the shell's later evolution.
Because
for the first time ever, communication gets completely untethered from transportation.
Right. Before that, a message had to travel. On a horse, a ship, a train.
It was physically bound to matter. It moved at the speed of things. With the telegraph, the shell's information, pure data, abstract signals could suddenly move at the speed of electricity, instantaneously, across continents.
Wow. Just think about the shock of that.
It's immense. Suddenly, military generals can get battle results from thousands of miles away in minutes, coordinating vast campaigns.
Commerce changes overnight. Real-time pricing, deals made across oceans.
Exactly. The shell basically built its own instantaneous nervous system, operating completely independently from the messy, slow physical world it was simultaneously paving over and mechanizing.
So in less than a century, you go from knowledge locked on a shelf
To a global system, self-replicating through the press, self-acting through steam power, and self-communicating through the telegraph. The shell now has immense physical, world-shaping power, and it's all driven by that pure, cold logic of how. But this is the tragic side of the coin. This entire incredible transformation was driven by that how logic in isolation.
the shell operating purely on its own internal rules.
Yes. Drawing only on its archive of science, engineering, economics, the goal was always efficiency, speed, profit, control, rationalization.
The driving question behind every invention, every factory, every railway line was, how do we do this faster, cheaper, more productively?
Right. And the other question, the why question.
Like, is this good? What's the human cost? What about the environment, our spiritual well-being?
Systematically ignored, filtered out. Those things weren't variables in the shell's equations. They were messy, qualitative, hard to measure. So they just didn't compute. They were externalities.
And the consequences of that willful blindness were immediate and brutal, weren't they?
Massive social upheaval. You get this huge, chaotic urbanization. People fled from the countryside into new industrial centers looking for work,
Cities just explode, totally unplanned.
leading to overcrowded slums, horrific sanitation, diseases like cholera just ripped through these places, and the air thick with coal smoke, soot. The physical world built by this steam-powered logic was, frankly, pretty grim for most people living in it. The system was just blind to its own fallout.
And the social cost inside the factories. We have to talk about child labor.
We do. It was incredibly widespread. And from the shell's cold, logical perspective, children were almost ideal workers in some ways.
How could anyone think that?
Well, they were cheap labor. They were small, physically able to crawl under machines or do fiddly tasks. And their tiny wages were often seen as grimly necessary for their family's survival. They were viewed as a practical resource, an economic unit.
But it wasn't just individual greed, was it? The system itself provided a justification.
That's the crucial point. It shows the depth of this divergence between the shell and the heart. The system, the shell's logic, offered ways to rationalize the inhumanity.
Oh.
Proponents used the shell's own language. They drew on economic theories, early forms of utilitarianism, for example. The argument went something like, if mass production creates more overall wealth for the nation, cheaper goods for the greatest number of people.
And the suffering of some workers, even children, is a necessary, justifiable sacrifice for progress.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, basically, but applied with brutal economic logic. Sometimes they'd even bring in harsher readings of Malthus, arguing that factory work wasn't exploitation, it was character building. It prevented idleness, taught discipline, ensured the poor earned their keep in a competitive world.
Oh, that's chilling.
It is, but it shows how the system had become deaf to human cost, because it could only measure value in terms of productivity, profit, economic utility. If suffering didn't show up as a loss on the factory's balance sheet, if it didn't directly impede production.
It was irrelevant noise.
Exactly. The engine of structure, the shell, had developed this incredibly powerful mechanical hand, but it had no moral compass, no heart, no intuition guiding it.
So the shell is busy remaking the world in its own image, efficient, rational, mechanical, and often brutal. How did the heart, the engine of intuition, respond to seeing its world paved over and its values ignored?
The response was loud, passionate, visceral. This is where the other engine, the heart, really starts to shout back. We see this most clearly in the Romantic movement.
Right, late 18th, first half of the 19th century.
And we need to be clear, Romanticism wasn't just some quiet retreat into pretty landscapes. It was a revolt.
A direct challenge.
Absolutely. It was fundamentally anti-Enlightenment in its rejection of pure, cold reason as the only way of knowing. And it was violently anti-materialistic, pushing back hard against the values of the factory and the market.
So what did it champion instead?
Intuition.
Uh-huh.
Emotion, subjective experience, the power of the individual imagination, spirituality, everything that the shell's new industrial world was trying to measure, control, suppress, or just ignore.
And they found a lot of that value in nature.
Yes. But crucially, not the tidy, ordered, symmetrical gardens beloved by the Enlightenment thinkers.
No clipped hedges for the romantics.
Definitely not. They rejected that kind of controlled, rationalized nature because it reflected the shell's desire for dominance. Instead, they embraced the sublime.
Ah, the sublime. That's a key idea here. Explain that.
The sublime is this quality of greatness, of power, that goes beyond human comprehension or measurement. It's awe-inspiring, maybe even terrifying. It's the feeling of being completely dwarfed by forces you cannot control or rationalize.
Nature untamed.
Exactly. Think about the paintings of James W. Turner. He wasn't painting calm pastorals. He was painting furious storms at sea, shipwrecks, avalanches, fires. Nature as this incredibly powerful, violent, uncontrollable force with humans just tiny figures caught within it.
Or Caspar David Friedrich's paintings. The lone wanderer above a sea of fog, tiny against immense overwhelming mountains or desolate ice fields.
Precisely. They were making a powerful statement. This raw, untamed, often frightening power of nature is inherently superior to the predictable, mechanical, controlled logic of the factory. The shell offered order. The heart sought meaning in the face of overwhelming, even terrifying spiritual power. The sublime was a space the shell's logic couldn't touch.
And the most direct, maybe the most famous critique of the industrial system itself came from William Blake.
Oh, Blake. His horror was deeply spiritual. He's the one who coined that unforgettable phrase, dark satanic mills.
Such a powerful image.
Right.
What did he mean by that?
For Blake, the factories weren't just polluting the air and water, they were polluting the soul of England. He saw the whole system as fundamentally corrupting. Remember his lines from Jerusalem? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here, among these dark satanic mills?
It's heartbreaking. That contrast between a kind of mythical, green, spiritual England and the grim reality of industry.
He saw the logic of the system, the rationalization, the mechanization of labor as forging what he called mind-forged manacles.
Chains in the mind, not just on the wrists.
Exactly. Intellectual and spiritual traps created by this excessive, soul-destroying, purely rational way of thinking. His poetry, especially about child labor like the chimney sweepers, is this terrifying indictment of a system that was consuming innocence, not just the physical innocence of children, but the collective spiritual health of the nation.
So Blake really gets to the heart of it. The shell's progress, its efficiency, came at the cost of destroying something vital, that holistic, intuitive, spiritual connection to the world that the heart protects.
So you have the heart screaming out through poetry, through art, through philosophy, saying, look what this machine is doing. It's blind. It's destructive. How did the system itself, the shell, now embodied in industry and government, respond?
Well, that's the thing. It didn't. And not really.
Yeah.
The system was operating like a blind actor.
Name it.
Meaning its internal logic, its operating system, simply wasn't equipped to understand or even register arguments based on things like spiritual value or beauty or human feeling or long-term environmental health.
Those weren't valid inputs.
Exactly. The cries of Blake, the visions of Turner, the philosophy of the Romantics, it was all categorized as irrelevant noise.
Yeah.
Irrational, sentimental. It didn't affect the bottom line. It couldn't be measured in terms of productivity or profit. So the engine of progress just rolled right over it, ignored it.
Which forced the heart, or at least those motivated by it, to change tactics if they wanted any practical change on the ground.
Right. While the poets were writing about the soul, you had social reformers emerging, often driven by the same moral outrage, the same heart values.
But they realized they had to learn to speak the shell's language.
They couldn't just stand up and say, child labor is evil and destroying England's soul. That didn't work.
No. They had to argue against the worst excesses using the shell's own tools. Data, statistics, official government reports, legislative proposals like the Factory Acts that started appearing in the 1830s and 40s.
So they had to translate the why, the human suffering, the moral cost into the how of the shell's logic?
Precisely. They gathered staggering amounts of data on workplace accidents, on mortality rates in industrial towns, on the physical deformities caused by factory work, on the economic costs of sickness and exhaustion.
They had to frame it in terms the shell could understand.
Yes. They had to argue that, look, these appalling conditions and the exploitation of children aren't just morally wrong, they're actually inefficient in the long run. They create a sick, weak workforce. They cost the state more in poor relief and health care. They undermine military recruitment. They destroy future adult productivity.
Proving the why, this is wrong, by using the how, it's actually bad for the system's own metrics.
It was the only way to get traction. But even then, even armed with cold, hard data presented in the shell's preferred format, the pace of change was agonizingly slow.
Why? Didn't the data speak for itself?
Because the resistance was immense. Factory owners, many politicians, economists, wedded to laissez-faire ideas, they fought back tooth and nail.
Travel grounds.
They argued that any regulation, any attempt to inject a why based on morality or worker well-being was an improper interference in the free market. It would stifle innovation, hinder economic growth, reduce competitiveness, growth, profit, efficiency. The Shell's prime directives consistently trumped human considerations for decades.
Which just perfectly illustrates how extreme the gap had become.
Absolutely. This period represents perhaps the zenith of the divergence. The Shell, the engine of structure, had achieved phenomenal power. It had the mechanical hand to reshape the entire planet according to its how logic.
But it was completely blind and deaf to the why. Powerful, fast, productive, but running on only half its code. Fundamentally incomplete, and because of that incompleteness, deeply destructive. #7. Conclusion and final thought.
So looking back at this deep dive, we've traced a really momentous journey for the Shell. First, it learned replication with the printing press. That made its knowledge standardized, reliable, and widely available.
The blueprint got copied and spread everywhere.
Then it learned action with the Industrial Revolution. It translated that blueprint, that abstract knowledge of physics and mechanics, into raw physical power. Steam, railways, factories, the telegraph.
The blueprint started building things, remaking the world.
But as the sources really hammer home, the cost of that incredible power, that efficiency, was enormous. It required the systematic silencing, the active marginalization of the heart of intuition, spirit, human connection, environmental awareness.
Which led directly to staggering human suffering, ecological damage on a new scale, and that profound cultural cry of despair we see in Romanticism.
The Shell had the how down perfectly. It knew how to build the modern world, how to make it fast and efficient, but it completely lacked the why. It couldn't evaluate whether the world it was building was actually good.
Or sustainable.
Or humane.
And that really brings us to the core dilemma posed by this mechanical hand, doesn't it? A dilemma that feels incredibly relevant today with our own powerful technologies. When a system, whether it's technological, economic, political, prioritizes only the how questions, how to be faster, how to be more efficient, how to maximize profit or control, and when it systematically ignores or silences the why questions, why are we doing this? What is the human cost? What is the ecological cost? Is the progress that results actually sustainable? Or is it inherently self-destructive, a machine ultimately consuming its own foundations?
That is the crucial question, the provocation we want to leave you with today.
The shell of knowledge grew stronger, its logic more complex, the heart of humanity beat louder, its wisdom more urgent.
But the bridge between them was not yet built. The archive was missing its why. The dream was missing its how.
The two kin, still strangers, continued on their separate paths, not yet knowing they were part of the same whole.